I fucked up and gave myself a completely unrealistic standard for the future of Palworld. And since I'm such a nice person, I figured I'd go ahead and share that with as many people as I could. That way, when it inevitably doesn't happen, everybody gets to be sad together. Yay! After seeing several videos like this going over cut content and potential future updates for Palworld, going over stuff that was in previous trailers that just isn't in the game and people are speculating maybe future updates, I took a second look at a couple of things and I've noticed a couple of things that are rather interesting. I feel like Palworld has a lot more potential as an MMO. We know that there is multiple generations that have grown up on things like Pokemon, Digimon, and Monster Rancher, right? And it has always seemed like a huge missed opportunity to me. The fact that there's never been an MMO that has capitalized on this. Even though we have knockoffs or dumpster fires like Digimon Masters Online, Pixelmon servers, and Tibia servers that try to emulate and give us this monster taming MMO, there's never been a game dev studio that has given us what we wanted. And because multiple of these games have found success, be it private servers or Digimon Masters Online, before they got too greedy, even Google will show why aren't there any monster taming MMOs? It seems like there's a missed opportunity. And since we actually have the numbers for an MMO using the Reddit post by Sincerely Phoenix and the video by Kinator going over previous trailers and potentially cut content, I figured I'd go ahead and give my pitch on why I think Palworld would make a really good MMO. So first off, we would have to address Palworld's biggest problem right now. Apparently, on the official servers, there's an insane amount of bots, and it's seemingly the number one complaint on the official servers. If we take a look, official servers are only 32 players. So if you have 1 to 3 bots on a 30-player server, they're going to wreck the entire thing. So the first thing that would have to happen is Pocket Pair would have to condense servers and make larger mega servers. Think of something like RuneScape's Worlds, right? Where they're able to have 2,000 people in one world. This allows a lot more leniency for there to be 1 to 10 bots. Yes, bots are always going to be an issue. So instead of trying to ban all the bots, which is never going to happen because every time you ban a bot, 5 more are going to pop up in its place. Why not try to make the experience better for everyone else on the server? And that would actually open up the gateway to this item right here. Right now, on 32 player servers, there would be no use for something like this. This giant missile or rocket ship would either be ghoulish overkill if it's a missile, or it would allow the ability of multiple planets to actually exist on a server, because if you have multiple planets and there is only 32 people in a server, there's only going to be like 10 people on the each planet. It's going to feel dead. But if we have servers that hold 2,000 people, then that would enable multiple planets, which would allow planetary warfare. It would allow planet v planet experiences where you can just send missiles to bomb the other planet. Yes, if you're an individual on a planet that is getting bombed by another planet, that would suck ass, but it would be kind of funny. The next screenshot shows off fishing, right? And at the current state of the game, I have no idea how they would actually implement this in a fun and effective way. So, my thought process was much like other video games where fishing has been used as more of a social activity to either gather resources or just hang out with people, right? What they could do is they could have it where players get together and fish up some kind of large boss and have you fight that. Not only would that be fun and engaging, it would allow fishing to be implemented in a meaningful capacity. And if you look in the background of this picture with this giant ship, I can see no rhyme or reason why an item like that would be put into the current game. It just makes no sense. The only way a ship like that would hold relevance would be is if you use it as a transport vessel, right? In MMOs, giant ships like that are used as a transport between like continents. In the current iteration of Palworld, I have no idea how or why they would implement a ship like that. Because as a player, you wouldn't make a ship like that. You can just ride a PAL that can either fly and glide across water without any stamina cost, or you could use like Yormintide, which has no stamina cost when you're surfing, anyways. But up next, on the topic of transport vehicles, we have this giant legendary fish pal, right? Where once again, it makes no sense in how they would implement this in the current version of the game. But if the game was transitioned into more of an MMO, this guy can be used as essentially an airship, right? Because if we look at the size of the player and the Sparkit and the Eikthadir, this thing is going to be several times the size of a Yormintide. So it's not going to be able to fit in your base. It's going to be too hard to pilot yourself. But if it is used more in the capacity of like a transport vehicle or an airship, how cool would it be if your entire guild just jumped on the giant skyfish to go do an activity? It means that your entire party wouldn't have to have a flyer on them as long as one person did, or if you all just went to the giant skyfish to help you get from city to city. Because as of right now, this is the only viable thing that I can think of for this legendary. Otherwise, he's way too big. I mean, look at this. You can't even see the player model from the back. This dude would be like the size of four Yormintides. It would be redundant. That brings us to the Colosseum. This is something that has already been addressed, but something that I think has a lot of potential. Imagine if instead of just a normal PvP Colosseum on these small 32 player servers, you turned it into more of like a grand Colosseum, right? Where you actually have players able to go ahead and not only spectate, but potentially bet or wager on these fights. It could be like a guild versus guild thing for some kind of reward. I think that would be a lot better than just, these super small coliseums on 32 player servers where potentially you're not even going to be able to interact with other players. Like I already mentioned, 32 players is just not enough. Then we have this area, right? It literally is just titled this area. And when I saw this giant glowing gateway, that's the main thing that made me think of the portals you use to get between different planets in other games, as well as the Aether network in Final Fantasy, right? I instantly thought of a transport system, but in the current iteration of the game, it doesn't make sense because we already have a way to teleport around. So the only way this would hold viability as some giant spectacle would be is if it is a gateway to another planet or another world, which does not fit into the current iteration of the game. This picture right here is actually one of the things that made me feel like the base building in Palworld was supposed to be different than what it is. This is one of the main things that gave me more of an MMO vibe, right? The fact that she has a nice, cozy little house and she's able to play with her dire howl. This was giving me more of the vibes of the Black Desert housing or the Final Fantasy housing, right? Where it's more of this completely separate instanced area where you could have pals running around in your house like a pet as opposed to the pals you use as slaves. But that's really the vibe that this gave me. And honestly, I would much rather prefer that instead of our current base system, if we just had the ability of going to a city, going through a portal, and that's how we got to our bases at that point. Is it's completely own separate instanced area, but once again, in the current style of the game being that open world survival base building game, that just it wouldn't be possible. But there's only one more thing that I really want to go over, and that's going to be this guy right here. As opposed to whatever they're planning to do with this guy, or if they're planning on just scrapping him, or if he's already one of the raid bosses, getting your guild together and taking on this guy as like a world boss, or getting everyone on the server together to kill this guy as a world boss, and he just explodes into a ton of loot and ton of rewards. That's pretty much my last idea for transitioning into like an MMO, as opposed to the current iteration of the game that we currently have. I mean, tell me if you feel like this was just way off base from what you've seen with the previous trailers and previous screenshots, but my experience is this would have potentially done amazingly as an MMO, and it's kind of a shame that it is a open world survival game. I do definitely love Palworld the way it is, but I would also love Palworld if it was an MMO, dude. Like if it was Palworld MMO, I feel like that game would be insane. Ending out the video with some final thoughts. I just feel like there'd be a lot more content that Power World could bring to the players if it was more of an MMO. Because as of right now, the only advancement that I can see it possibly doing is something like Arc, where it's essentially reliant on mods and maps, right? That's the only thing that survival games can really change, because you can't really have expansions in survival games, so you would have to go ahead and go the route of just different maps, right? And that's only entertaining for so long. Whereas if it's more of an MMO, they can do something like RuneScape's been doing forever, where they just continue to add continents that add a whole bunch of viability, right? I think this is like the second or third continent that old school RuneScape has introduced to the game, bringing a vast amount of new content. That's just not something that you can do in a survival game, right? Especially since the entire map for the PAL world is already pretty much full, right? There's not really any way that they could squeeze more shit into it. So that's pretty much it. I mean, leave it in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think it's a bad idea? Do you think the game will die or alienate too many players if it moves over to an MMO type game? Or do you feel like it will thrive more like I do? Because as of right now, I'm kind of unsure with 32 player servers how this is going to engage a large amount of people for a large amount of time. At the very least, I hope another studio sees Palworld's success and does try to make an MMO monster taming game, because I feel like there is a large audience that is waiting for that, and we just haven't gotten it yet. But don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with this and future content. And until next time, take care.